Guys, and welcome back to another review. Today, it's a book review. Who? Colleen Hoover. What book? All Your Perfects. Let's get right into it. If you have not seen one of my reviews before, know that I do spoil these books. This book has been out for like almost 10 years now. So if you haven't read it, I hope you do. Read it, come back, watch this video. We're going to discuss it. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to give you the plot. I'm going to give you the ending. And then we're going to talk about what I thought of the book and why I think you should read it. All Your Perfects by Colleen Hoover starts with Quinn, we have Graham, we have Ava, who is Quinn's sister, we have Reed, who is Ava's husband, we have Ava's mother, who is in the picture, and okay, so we start the book. Quinn is walking up to her fiance, Ethan's apartment. The reason I didn't mention him as a character is he's not much in the book. Shows up, opening, chapter. She's walking up to his apartment. There's a man, Graham, standing in front of his door, pacing. He's angry. What's going on? She thinks maybe he's a crazy guy. Maybe he's there to hurt Graham or, Ethan. Maybe he has this life that she knows nothing about. Well, come to be, that is true. Graham is out there because Ethan is inside his apartment with Graham's girlfriend. They are getting it on. You can hear it from the outside. Quinn and Graham end up talking. They end up eating the Chinese food that their infidelity-filled partners had ordered post-coitus, and they sat outside and ate it. Well, they waited for the door to open. It finally did. Ethan and Graham's girlfriend, I forget her name at the time, come out. Oh my gosh, oh please, let me talk to you. They both leave. Nothing happens for about 6 months. They rejoin, and they have a little... oh, hey, there's you again. They almost hook up, and then they don't. Then the book begins to flash back and forth between timelines. It says now. Now is talking about the present version of Lily speaking, and then is her giving the perspective of how they met. So the whole time you find out she's really starting from the perspective of how they met, because then it goes to they're happily married. Spoilers incoming, 3, 2, 1. And it's her struggling with the fact that she loves her husband, but she cannot be physical with him in any way because she's struggling with infertility. And every time that they're supposed to be physical, it leads to sex, which she feels like becomes a just complete disaster in her mind. She spends, long times in the shower crying, thinking about how she's a failure. As a person, as a woman, she has always wanted to be a mother, and then it starts to get into her relationship with her mother, which is not good. Her mom never wanted to have kids. She doesn't really know what love is. She uses men for money. Quinn's father died. She remarried within a year to a man with money and a beach house and all this stuff. So she doesn't have a solid relationship with her mom. They meet once a week just so they can be criticized by her mom. So it's kind of a toxic thing. This book is short. I read it in about 4 or 5 hours. So you get through the story pretty quick. Then you find that Quinn and Graham are falling apart because not only the infertility issue, but just the lack of want to be with the other person is starting to shine clear to Graham, where he's like, you don't want to be with me, you just want to be a mom, and now that you can't be a mom, you got nothing to do with me. And it hurt him. So they don't talk about any of these things. They have a few small fights that lead to not talking, separating, sleeping in separate parts of the house or whatever. So immediately you start to wonder, okay, where's this going to go? If you've read any of Colleen Hoover's books, which I just finished, It Starts With Us and It Ends With Us, you're like, there's going to be some mega event that happens. Somebody's going to cheat. Somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's going to happen. Well, Graham kisses another woman that he works with and tells Quinn about it. The night he walks in, the very first night, he is caught in his car wiping his neck and getting himself all together after cheating. And it was a situation where she was very upset, but then it all kind of came out. And he goes, this is why I did this. She reminds me of you. I miss you, and I don't have you anymore, and I don't think I'm ever going to get you back. So they separate. She ends up, her sister Ava moves away, moves to Europe with her husband Reed, who gets a job there. She ends up going to stay there after a big incident breaks out. A fight happened between Graham and Quinn. She went to the restroom and starts screaming. Graham has to, take her to the hospital, and they find out that she was pregnant and she miscarried due to an ectopic pregnancy. I have personal experience with a story just like that in my own personal life, which I write about in my book. And that was gut-wrenching. That was gut-wrenching to read that all the problems that caused their marriage to fall apart, and the fact that they weren't speaking about any of them, and they weren't really speaking about anything at all. They were avoiding each other and just kind of becoming roommates. That is something that I think a lot of people can connect to, whether it's, not, you don't have to have infertility issues or have to have lost a child together to have that same problem, where you have a big looming problem in your relationship or marriage and no one's talking about it, because it's easier to get through the day by day by not addressing the thing that might make you both have to look at a situation and go, this is over. This is done. We're holding on because we want this, or we thought this was going to be this way, but it's just simply not. Right? And a lot of people aren't willing to have that conversation. This book puts into question, like, is love enough? I think it got kind of complicated towards the end, because Graham was the perfect husband. He did everything to support Quinn, and he was gave her space, tried to talk when he thought he needed to, but when he kissed the other girl, you immediately was like, well, now they can't salvage this. And some of that might be my own bias, where if you cheat, the relationship's over, but it's like, somehow you did buy his excuse, where it was like, I missed you, man. And she reminded me of you. It had nothing to do with her. Yes, I was wrong for doing what I did, but she reminds me of you. And that was something where you're like, I still don't condone what he did, but you also started to not really pull for Quinn either, because she's having all this, it's not resentment, but she's creating all this distance from her husband that she's knowingly creating, and she acknowledges in her own internal monologue what it's doing, or what it's probably doing to him. And it's not that she chooses to do it anyway, it's just that through her depression, she has no other choice but to just create that distance. So she knows she's pushing him away, and I think that's why when he kissed the other woman, she wasn't like, well, you kissed her, that's it. Now, I think had they slept together, it'd have been a totally different situation. Had he been like having a relationship with her, that'd have been a totally different situation. He quit his job like the next day because he said, I can't work with the person I made the worst mistake of my life with. So anyway, after the loss of the child and her, hysterectomy, which is, if you don't know, that's where your womb is essentially taken out. She goes and visits Ava in Europe, and she's trying to figure out, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? She's also just trying to get it out of her head completely. Graham shows up, and the whole time there's been this box that she's threatening to open, which you can tell towards like chapter 8, 9, 10. Okay, this box means we're ending the marriage. So finally he brings the box and he goes, is it time? Like, do we need to open this? And she's like, yeah, I think it's time. So he admits, hey, I've been writing notes for a while and putting them in there, so you have more than one. So he walks away to another room. She walks out to a balcony and she starts to read them. And it's his confessions over the whole time. The first one is just how much he loves her, why he loves her, how he believes that they'll be together forever, and he has some like corny math thing because he's a math guy. And then there's other letters where he's having the conversations with her that she won't have. Quinn, I know this is bothering you. I know how bad this is hurting you, but like, I wish I was enough. And then there's his confession that he wasn't saying to her, like, I wish I was enough for you. I wish that whatever life was now with me was enough. And as a man who's been in relationships who made me feel like just being me wasn't enough, if it wasn't that I wasn't reaching for a new job, or we weren't reaching to have kids, or we weren't reaching for a new house, it's like, what about just having me? When does that become enough? And I could connect to Graham for that. And I could also connect to Graham for the final act of desperation to be like, look, I really believe, because the whole time from day one, he was telling her, we're soulmates. You just don't know it yet. Like, we're going to be together forever. You just don't know this yet. So I'm just giving you time to catch up because I've known it. They weren't as standoffish with Graham as they were with the main character of Verity, where he was like, I don't want a relationship. I want nothing but one night stands. With Graham, it was more just he popped into the picture, fell in love with her, and that was all she wrote. So him showing up in the act of desperation with the box, saving their marriage, that's what it ends up doing. She sees how hard he was actually trying and realizes the error in her ways of shutting him out. They go, okay, we're going to fix this. Book ends. Epilogue begins. They end up moving to Europe on a kind of a whim. They've come to terms with the fact that they're never going to have kids. They even kind of joke about it. When people ask about their kids, they lie and say they have like way too many or they're way too old or whatever. And they kind of have fun with it. And then finally they end up getting a dog. And the whole thing was in like the heat of one of their fights, like the biggest one before they went and slept in other rooms. Graham asked Quinn, was like, why didn't we get a dog? Like, he just wondered, like, why did we never just take that step? It was something we both wanted, and we just didn't do it because we were so focused on the one thing we didn't have. We didn't go get the things we could still have that we wanted. And he said all that by just asking, like, why didn't we ever get a dog? So at the very end, once they, bring everything back together, they end up getting a dog, and they name it August because he carried 2 fortunes from fortune cookies around with him from their first date that had 88 on it, which was the day they met. And he said it was like the day that they would end up back together, and it was. So it was a very significant number, so they named the dog August. Happy ending. They talk about how they're still not giving up hope. They're still going to try to adopt, even though Graham has a charge on his record from when he was 19. He was drunk and got in a car accident that was not his fault, that killed his friend, injured another, and he ended up doing some time for it, therefore making it difficult to adopt. How do I like this book? I like the book. It was an easy read. I got through it quickly. I didn't want to put it down once I picked it up. I appreciated how Colleen Hoover touched on one of the most important difficulties in relationships, which is when people choose not to communicate. That ends a lot of relationships, and it ends relationships long before they actually end. People will stay in a relationship for years just because they choose one day not to communicate anymore, not to share what's on their mind, not to be honest. And it becomes easier to just not say anything and walk through your life and do the day-to-days and just, get through. And at some point, someone notices and goes, oh no, something's happened here. It's not usually invisible, the elephant in the room to the marriage. Everyone usually knows what the problem is, or at least where it stems from. It's the choosing not to speak about it. It's the acting as if there isn't such an issue that becomes the biggest invisible elephant in the room. Because once you do that for days, it becomes weeks, it becomes months, it can become years, and then you forget what you're even forgetting about. Now you're just in a room with a person you don't talk to. And that shit is the most lonely feeling a person can go through. To be in a room with a person that once claimed that they loved you, now you're essentially nothing to them because of something you couldn't give them, something that wasn't able to come through in their life or whatever. You stop being good enough. I think if you've ever been in a serious adult relationship, especially if one where you've lost children like I have, you can appreciate the struggle that comes with that. Obviously, this is a romance novel, so these are 2 people that were strongly in love and should have had a kid together, but a lot of us can connect to having situations where you shouldn't have had kids together. And then you get stuck in that relationship where I think a lot of us kind of related to it starts and ends with us because there was that complicated relationship of like, I always have to worry about what this other person is going to think because I have kids with them, from my own personal experience. But again, a lot of that all stems from having issues, not talking about them, growing resentment for somebody. And then actually, now in this book, they loved each other the whole time. They just kind of fell away from why they loved each other. But I think a lot of times in real life, you can actually start to lose love for a person, which then makes you realize you never really loved them at all. And that's the complexity of some of these romance novels, and Colleen Hoover is very good at capturing the complexity. If you've gone through life and you're not a super young person reading these books at face value, there's a lot of value in them. There's a lot of ways that you can learn to navigate situations, and a lot of ways that people can learn from people doing things wrong. Graham kissing the girl just because he missed his wife, that was a hard thing to excuse, but to close the book, you had to. You had to. And it was something where you had to show grace in a situation where maybe you didn't want to. And it puts you in a situation for Quinn where you go, you know, you both have to live with the decisions you made in the things you did, the things you said, the things you didn't say. Because there was one night he was super drunk, which he didn't usually do, and they ended up making love, and she wasn't really into it. Her inner monologue was saying she was just trying to get him to finish so, you know, the chances of her getting pregnant could just go away and she could, you know, have her period and find out she wasn't pregnant again. That's all she was thinking of. And it wasn't his fault. That's the thing. She put it in the way where it's like, this is not his fault, but I'm just not into this. And he finally said something like, why don't you act like you want this again? Sometimes I feel like I'm fucking a dead corpse. And that was it. It was over, because she kind of already knew that was the vibe she was given. And if you've been in adult relationships, man, you know when your partner's off, you know when they're not there, you know when something's different. And for her to embrace that the way she did, usually Colleen Hoover is real heavy on the sex and getting it down and dirty for her romance novels. And this one, she showed the intimacy in the lack thereof, which I thought was cool. I thought there was a lot of value to be brought in that. So if I had to give this book, we'll go to star ratings out of 5 stars. I'm going to give this one 5 stars because I like the message. I like the characters. I thought they were well developed. I like the going back and forth between 2 timelines instead of making it separate books. You know, they could have written this from the present day standard and then gone back and written a prequel like she did with It Starts and Ends With Us. I'm glad that didn't happen. I like the quick, casual Sunday read. I like the fact that it's a book with purpose. I always appreciate that from Colleen Hoover. So 5 out of 5 stars. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Love you, and we'll see you in the next one. This episode is brought to you by Audible.com. Guys, you know that I love to read. You also know that I didn't always love to read. I got into reading by audiobooks. Audible, brought to you by Amazon, is the largest collection of audiobooks and now podcasts. They have original series. They have original music, meditations. Guys, Audible has everything. It's not just books. So if you want to support the show and you want to get into reading or listening to books, I listen to it a lot while I'm traveling in my car. You could do the same. Click on the link in the description, join Audible today, and you'll get your first month free. Thanks for supporting the show.